Hello guys, how you doing? Carrie Silverhorn here with GSTRV and My Pocket Tech, and I am coming to you live for the Technical Question Tuesday. So let's dive on in. We are going to do a small recap of what we went over last week, and we went over batteries. And that question was from Sheila from Illinois, and she asked about batteries. And so let me just recap for that really quickly. There's three types of batteries. There's lead acid, there's AGM, and then there's lithium. And so our question kind of goes into that today that I pulled, and it's from T from North Carolina. And she asks how I can charge my batteries more efficiently. So we're going to go over some of the stages of charging batteries. And that's a very good question, because what happens a lot of times is that people are limping basically on half full batteries. And I'll kind of show you what that means here in just a minute. So we're going to take a look at this image right here. We have three stages of battery charging, right? You have bulk, absorption, and float. So to kind of break this down in a way that we can understand this in layman's terms, I kind of equate this to merging into traffic. Okay. So when you're getting ready to merge into traffic, you're going to give it the gas, right? So you're going to get into traffic. That is your bulk stage. Then you have to kind of stay at that speed and kind of weave in and out through traffic in order to get to a comfortable setting, right? That's your absorption. And then you can kind of hit the cruise control and just kind of cruise, right? That's the float. So with these three stages, you give it a lot of electricity. It stays at that level of electricity, and then it kind of tapers off, and then it floats along, right? So you'll kind of see whenever you're running your your battery or your RV on a generator, your battery, depending on what you have, if it's AGM or lead acid, your batteries might be reading like 13.6 or 13.2, right? So those, and then after you stop the generator, it might actually go down. Okay, so that is your bulk and absorption rate. And then when it drops down, finally, it drops down to a float. And so that's your float state. Now, if you have lithium batteries can reach as high as 14 something, 14.2, 14.3, somewhere in there. And then it'll drop that down to like a 13.6, 13.9. So lithium batteries are going to have a higher float than AGM or lead acid batteries, right? So let me go ahead and give you that again. So you have bulk, you have absorption, and you have float. So T's question was how she can better charge her batteries because they're going dead all the time. And so she thought she had a problem with her batteries. So one of the things that we see is you're not charging your batteries long enough. Okay. So I don't know about you, but me personally, I don't like running my generator for a long period of time. It's noisy, takes a lot of gas. You think you're disturbing people if you're camping around people. So this is something that people don't do. They just use it to maybe turn on the microwave or cook a meal or, just top off everything, right? Well, that's how you get to the point where you're limping along on a battery. You, for lead acid and AGM, it has to be charged 3 to 3.5 hours at a time. So that absorption time that you're in traffic is 3 to 3.5 hours. Okay. And I don't know about you, but I don't know of anybody that runs their generator for 3.5 hours. And usually that's the people that you're cussing because they forgot that it's running, right? Or they're running their TV. So then it drops down to float. Now for lithium, you have to run it. And this is all dependent on manufacturers. So every manufacturer is different, and you can actually see the manufacturer on here. But and you'll look at their specs on what they decide is the good absorption rate. So then the manufacturers for lithium specify 4 hours. So it takes 4 hours to get that absorption of all that electricity into the battery. So when I talk about electricity, you'll hear me a lot of times talk about buckets of water, because that's basically what electricity is. You have a container, like a 5-gallon bucket, and you have to fill it with as much electricity or water as possible that is trickling out. So you have a little small trickle, and then you have a bunch of it coming in. So we went through the ways that that comes in on the last one. And so whenever you're doing the bulk absorption and float, that is basically packing that bucket full of as much water as it can hold, right? Okay. So that's kind of a way that you can kind of think about that. So whenever you're charging your deal, and we'll go back over the ones that we went through. So there's 4 ways to charge your batteries. There is the pigtail for a towable, so your 7-pin. There's, or the drivable, so from the alternator, basically. So from the alternator of a driving vehicle that connects to whatever. So if you have a Class C, if you have a Class A, you're driving that, the alternator charges the batteries, right? So the second way is shore power, right? Plugging into an actual pedestal, okay? The third way is a generator, okay? Also plugging into the generator or using the onboard generator. And the fourth way is solar, right? So these type of situations, whenever we're talking about bulk absorption and float, it kind of excludes solar, because solar is just a constant trickle. There's not a whole lot that's going into the batteries versus what's coming out. So you're just more or less at a steady pace. Now you might see on your solar controller that it's in bulk state or it's in float state or anything like that. It might tell you that what state it's in, but it's still what you're using out is generally, if you're solely relying on solar, generally what you're putting out is way more than what you're pulling in, unless you have just a massive setup. So that's usually why we have to have the assist from other things. So if anybody else has a question, I would be more than happy to answer that. And I will go ahead and put this, oops, not that one, this one, so that you can clearly see the bulk, the absorption, and the float. Yes, yes. Okay, so we do have a question here. Why does it take so long for the absorption rate to why does it take so long for the absorption rate? Well, it really depends on, like what I said. And you might have came in a little bit late, but it really depends on, you're basically pumping that battery, and you're never going to be able to use 100% of that battery. So let me just clarify that. So if you have a 100 amp hour battery, you're really only going to be able to utilize 20 or 80% of that. 20% of that is always going to be its reserve. If you have a lead acid or an AGM, you're not going to be able to really get that down low. So according to manufacturer's specs, an AGM or a lead acid battery, if it drops below 10 volts on a consistent basis, it's considered deceased. Like they won't even recharge it. It's not rechargeable because it won't hold a charge after that. You basically have killed it. So, and then of course, like we talked about last time, if anything drops below 10.5 on your systems, 10.5 volts, then that will shut down your whole system. No control panels will work. You'll have alarms screaming. No lights will work. And so that is the cutoff point, is like 10.5 or below. If you're at 11, you're in the scary zone, right? So you need to make sure that that's always around 12 or above. That's what the system is designed to run off of, is 12 volts or above. Okay. So the manufacturer's specs on that, the absorption rate is you're basically just putting back the stored electricity into the battery and letting it hold as much as it can possibly hold, so that it is good to go. It's kind of the same thing as like a gas tank. You're filling your gas tank full. If you're full gas tank, you run a lot more miles than if you're just a half or 3/4 of the way full or whatever. And if you get down to a quarter of a tank and you still got a ways to go, that's a scary situation, right? Especially in Nevada, because there's like no gas stations anywhere to be found, right? So that's kind of the equivalent to it. You have to run your batteries at max capacity at full, and then they will run great. It's just like a phone battery. Your phone battery is a lithium battery. So when you plug that in and leave it plugged in overnight, it charges to 100% and it will last all day long, right? Now, lithiums can go down to scorched earth and come back again, right? They can go down to zero. Again, your system is not going to work, right? If it gets below 10.5, it's not going to work. Nothing's going to work. But doing that, if you've ever done that, or have a teenager who's done that, right? Run their phone battery down, then charge it back up, and then run their phone battery down. What happens is that phone decides to not work so well, right? So whenever you, run it down and put it back up, run it down, put it back up, it actually ruins it. So it really decreases the life of the battery, right? AGMs and lead acids are good for about 5 years. Okay, so in 5 years, you need to change those out. Lead acid, again, like we went over last week, lead acid does have to be maintained. So you do have to maintain the distilled water levels in that battery. Okay, that is your job to maintain that. AGM is sealed, so you don't have to break that open and get into that. Lithium's sealed, you don't have to do that at all. Okay. Can everyone see the chat? Okay. Hi, Michelle. Did you have a question for me?
I did. How many batteries do I need to power my conversion van?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So, one of the things that I would have to know is what size of a space that you would have. So, if you're just theoretically looking at this, it would be the size of the space that you would have for the batteries, and then also how much power consumption that you utilize. So, there's a really good calculator that I can put, and I can link that into the chat, and I can link that on the page that you can actually calculate this, like if you're using solar, calculate the daylight hours by your zip code, and it'll tell you kind of how much solar you have, and then you can put in your wattages of like your appliances. So it takes a little bit of homework on your part to make that happen, but you also, it's a really good exercise because sometimes you're just like, well, you have a hair dryer and I have an Instapot and I have all this stuff, and then I leave all these lights on, and then you're like, oh my God, that's a lot, And so then you kind of start like kind of weeding out the wants and the non-necessity things and really focusing on the really necessity items, right? So then you can kind of pare that down. So once you kind of know how much power you're using for just normal function, then you go by amp hours and you would just build your battery bank by amp hours. So if you're doing 100 amp hour batteries and you want however many hours you need that to run. So you want as many that you have. Like I have 4 100 amp hour batteries, and that is significantly enough to charge and run all of my infrastructure here in my trailer. But some people have 6, they have 8, just depends on how much electricity that you use. Okay. Does that answer your question? Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Yes. So another question that just came in was, how expensive are these batteries? What's my budget for batteries? Okay, so we talked a little bit about this last week. So lead acid is going to be the cheapest. However, AGM is like the middle ground. It's a little bit more expensive. But however, lithiums are really giving people a run for their money. Okay, so they are, I would say professionally and personally, in my opinion, the far better battery because of the way they're built. However, they do have their own side effects from that. But they have been running almost parallel neck and neck with the middle ground. So you get a far superior battery. This one shows like a Life PO4. So that one has actually been tested by several different techs and has shown like far superior qualities. So that is definitely something that you can look at. I would just look at some different suppliers. Lion batteries, Big Beard batteries is another one. But the Life PO4 is a wonderful battery. And a lot of those come with Bluetooth accessible apps that go right to your phone. So you can see the battery, you can see the heat, all that stuff. Now, the side effects of lithium are they do get hot. Okay. And so normally batteries have to be outgassed, right? And so outgassing, what that means is that they're always in a compartment where there's like air getting to them. So that's why they're under your step, or they're outside, or they're in a compartment, and you can tell that there's like a tray and then there's just, nothing but air on, 3 or 4 sides of them, right? So, and it's toxic to have them inside. So they're going to produce a gas that comes out. So they have to be ventilated, right? So AGM and lead acid have to be ventilated. So lithium, you can put those under your couch. You can put them under those cabinets. You can put them wherever you want to put them, right? Mine are in the bottom of my closet. So I just ripped up the floor of my closet, put a drop floor, and put my 4 batteries there, right? So in that case, they're in an enclosed environment. I did put vents on the compartments on the outside, so there was ventilation, and I did put a 12-volt fan that I wired that blows across them. You do need to have a specific fire extinguisher meant for lithium batteries. I cannot stress that enough because it's one that actually reacts with the chemical reaction that's happening in the lithium, and it stops that. It stops the chemical reaction. The regular extinguishers are just to suffocate and remove oxygen. That's not going to stop this chemical reaction. It's just going to continue to go, right? And it goes pretty fast. So they're not very expensive, and I can link that for you. It's a very small can. It almost looks like a little aerosol can. And I keep one in my bedroom right by my lithium batteries, and then one by the front door. So it's actually really good to have, even like for bearings or something, because it's kind of a good shot. So if you have a bearing that heats up, It's also really good and handy to have. Keep it in your truck. That is definitely something that I would look at. And then I would always hook those parallel. And we kind of went over that last time. Parallel and is like an equal sign. So you go from negative to negative, 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 positive, 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 all the way straight across, makes an equal sign. It still remains 12 volt, but you up and double your amp hours. Okay. So if you have 100 amp hours and you hook up 4 of those, you now have 400 amp hours, right? So that also goes in line with your question, Michelle. So you can just continue to build the bank that you want to build. So you can start small. And I always suggest starting with 2 batteries if you have the room, or make the room, but start with 2 batteries and then up that the more that you start to use your van or your rig, and see where you fall. So you don't have to just go out of the gate with like 6 or 8. You can start with 2 and see if it does the job for you, and then continue to up that from there. I'm open for any questions that anybody might have. We have a couple of minutes left. Yes, just do your research. That's also a good one. As far as the budget's concerned, back to the budget, just do your research. You can look on Amazon. You can go to, if you're going budget wise and you're concerned about budget, the big like Camping World and stuff like that, they're not going to be the most budget friendly because they're in it for a profit. So anything that's very niche organized, like a niche market. So if it's an actual camping store, it's going to be higher up there. But like Amazon, something like that, a lot of times you can get some decent deals. Like I've seen Lion batteries at Costco. I think like they're affiliated with Costco, so they have Lion Energy batteries at Costco, and some of those are at really good prices. So just kind of get a sense of the thing. Like start with measuring your space. What space do I have? And even last week, another lady had asked, like, how many lithiums can I fit where my batteries are? Well, her batteries are under the steps, and she only has 2 batteries there. So then you would need to measure the measurements of the lithium batteries versus the measurements of the lead acid batteries, and see how many you can fit in there. And a lot of times you can get one big one. And I actually saw this after I did my battery bank of 400. I got a 600 one that was pretty much almost equivalent to the size and shape of the 4, but I could have had 600 amp hours. Well, I'd already done it. So there's always things that are going to be coming up. Just take a look on those and see kind of what works best for you on your space, on your budget, and then your electricity needs. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put this on here one more time. So this is what we went over today: bulk, absorption rate, and float. So you're going to give it the gas, give it all you've got at bulk. Okay, and that's going to stay there for a good period of time. Okay, and then it's going to drop a little bit, and you're going to just have nothing but absorption. It's just going to absorb as much electricity as it possibly can. And then it's going to kind of curve a little bit and drop from the high number that you saw and drop down, and that's its float stage. Now, another way that you can test if your battery is doing A-okay or not, if you don't have a meter, which everyone should have a meter, is you can actually start your generator and see what level your battery voltage goes up to. So when you're pumping electricity into that battery and you're charging your battery and it's at 13.4, and then you have nothing running, okay, except for your refrigerator, which runs all the time, which takes battery power. If you have nothing running except for the refrigerator, no lights on, no nothing else, and you kick off your generator, it should drop a little, like maybe 13.4 to like 12.9. Okay, if it's like a lead acid AGM, right? If it's a lithium, you can get up to the 14s, and then it'll drop to like maybe a 13.8, 13.6. Okay, so a little higher voltage on that one. Then if you have nothing running and you consistently see, or there's a big drop, or you see a little trickle of a drop, your battery's not holding a big charge. It's not holding enough electricity. So one of the things you can do is that, and see if that is the concern. And then you can take your batteries in and, to Walmart or to an O'Reilly's or an auto store, and they'll put them on the charger. Generally, they're going to put them on the charger for an hour or so, and then they're going to test them, and it's going to tell them whether the battery is dead or not, right? But that's kind of a little trick that you can utilize to see. Just let it charge, and then once you kick your generator off, see if it's a big drop or see if there's a constant little trickle. Now you'll see a little bit, like you start turning the light on, different things like that. You're going to see the meter go down just a little bit. But if it drops from 13.2 to like 12.2, like it drops like 10 points, it's not holding a charge, right? So just a little tip there. You can utilize that. Thank you guys so very much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it.